First one from Saloni Kothari. I think she's a young woman going into the workforce. Reading her questions, I can kind of tell. She's asking, in the previous slide, there was a bar chart that showed that white people had higher rate of mental health issues than Asian people. Do you think that this difference is due to reporting avoidance? There tends to be a lot of shame surrounding mental health in Asian communities, and probably that's where the reporting avoidance. What do you think?
I'll share my perspective, and I obviously would love to hear Preet's as well. So you're right, Saloni. I think there's definitely a huge factor of that. As Asians, we are, there's a lot of stigma. There's a lot of shame in accepting, I have, stress, or I'm feeling anxious, or I'm going through some panic attacks, and it's actually known that a lot of Asians present more with somatic symptoms or somatization. So I'm using a kind of a fancy medical term, but what it means is a lot of the times in Asian culture, especially, we see women coming to primary care physician's office with lots of other physical symptoms like headaches, stomach aches, back pain. And then, of course, they do the medical workup and nothing is pointing towards a medical reason for that. And stress and anxiety, depression tends to be what's driving that, because there's a huge mind-body connection. So a lot of that is how they, that's how they feel like that's a more acceptable way to get help.
As a researcher and wanting to research around South Asian mental health, what we face is that there isn't enough data out there. And so those numbers, on paper may look like, okay, well, we're not struggling as much, but we are not doing research on South Asian mental health. We're not, there's not disaggregated data. Even the Asian data probably doesn't include a lot of South Asian folks. And so being mindful that, and that's where the stigma continues, that these things don't happen in our communities. These are Western diseases. They're quote unquote white diseases. And so the importance is that we need to start breaking these stigmas so that we can do more research and people will come forward and want to talk about their stories and share what their experiences are.
What can fathers, husbands, and brothers do to support the mental health of their wives, sisters, and daughters at home? And I'm going to add a little bit onto that. What are we doing to educate the fathers, husbands, and brothers? How do they get that information? So, who would answer that?
I can take an attempt because I live with all boys and men. But I think what we need to understand that it's not just us that we are going through. The boys and men are also going through mental health, mental stress, but they don't express it. So just because, our symptoms show out more easily because we are, our body systems, we don't have the testosterone or something to keep looking strong. But so I think being vulnerable with them and sharing with them so they'll be vulnerable with you, allowing them because to open up. It is mental health stress is experienced evenly throughout all. Somehow, we shouldn't say it's one-sided more than the other, but they have been traditionally taught not to show it. So they've learned how to dismiss it. And that's why often they suffer deeper, but we don't know. So keeping that in mind, the women should say that, I'm feeling all of this. Maybe they're also feeling this way. Can I reach out to them and share how I'm feeling and invite them to share, are you also feeling this way? Because then you can empathize with each other. At the same time, of course, making this awareness because, like social stigma, cultural, traditional roles, having a nice conversation and including them in how you're thinking and feeling. Because especially you can start bringing your children in first. As they're growing up, you can say, I'm exhausted, I'm sitting down, I need a little bit of a rest. So the children accept that, oh, moms, like when early on when they were teenagers, I told them, you know what, I need my energy, so I need to go meditate. So when I was meditating, even though they were hungry, tired, crying, they were little kids at that time, but they said, no, mom's meditating because they knew that after I did that, when I came back, I was more open, more energetic, and more able to handle their needs. So just setting up a system, creating a few simple boundaries, and also inviting them to understand how you're feeling and empathizing. I think that's really important.
That's a great answer. So then over to another question by Smriti. She says over two-thirds of caregivers are women caring for partners, parents, and children. While this brings comfort to many, managing competing paid and unpaid work demands can influence the physical and mental health. Having said that, how can women have a more balanced approach towards such situations?
I think work is work. We shouldn't say what is paid work or unpaid work, because I'm doing a startup, and initially in startup there is no money, but I'm working harder than I've ever worked in my life before, right? But the passion is there because we are helping. And during the pandemic, it really helped because we felt we are doing something about the situation. We are creating solutions for mental health for students, and in fact, we added on creating for teachers and parents. So understanding that paid work or unpaid work, like again, that's another thing we need to help our family members understand, that whether you help, cooking in the kitchen, you're providing nourishment so that these people are healthy and working. So we should not distinguish about paid work and unpaid work. Work is work. And that's another thing we need to train our children from a young age, that if you're busy and doing something, whether it's paid or not, is equally important. And how do we bring our children up feeling that way so that when they have their spouses, they're working in the world, they start understanding that, everything is important. And let's not judge by monetary value of things, because more than money, there's, like life situations are so much more important than money. So does that answer the question? I just want to make sure they feel that it answered what they were specifically aiming for. But we need to re-educate ourselves, because we catch ourselves doing that too, right? Sometimes when I'm trying to decide between what to do, and this is paid and that's not paid. So we have to reprogram our own brains, our own minds to see how important is it in the overall big picture of life versus just, what is it going to do? And I understand in some situations, people have to work on the paid part, like it's not that everyone has the option. So whoever's doing that, but still respect the person who's doing something that's still not paid, but it has so much value.
Yeah, thank you for saying that, Dr. Preeti, because many times the unpaid category is considered as if somebody's not doing much work, but that's not the case. Sometimes it's much more work that they do and juggle, which probably the paid category may not even realize. So I don't think anybody should even feel that they are not paid, and so probably they are worthless. No, that shouldn't be.
And I just want to interject, one more point, like as a homemaker, often a lot of the wives who are homemakers are not considered to be doing much, or they are not bringing in the money or whatever. Culturally, there is a different view about looking down upon them or not feeling like they are as important as somebody else who might be, has a working spouse. I think I have a lot of respect for homemakers. I mean, as a professional, of course, I am a mom and also like do my, take care of my home. But whenever I have, taken time off and focused more on just, housekeeping and taking care of home, you realize, oh my gosh, this work is a lot more work than the professional work often you do. So work is work, raising kids, keeping your household healthy and clean and whatnot. It is very important part of the life as well. And that does not need to be disregarded.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm going to go to the next question. This is from an anonymous attendee. How do you get a young adult who is disconnected from the family and friends to a therapist if they don't even want to talk about it? And this kind of also ties into the stigma of our South Asian community around mental health. But especially for young adults, how do we get them some help?
So, I mean, this could be young adult, this could be anyone that's not really ready to go see a therapist. We're in this midst of technology where we have lots of apps available on kids' phones. These are things that kids are connected to, and I'd love for Preeti to chime in as well, as because she is working with youngsters in terms of technology, and it's really important that we open up or model these things for our kids, is because they will engage in apps and they will engage in social media. So, having them follow someone that might be a psychologist or a provider on social media, sharing, say, hey, like I was reading some posts by this person and it might be helpful. Youth really jump on that opportunity to follow someone and hoping that they would follow them back, and so just trying to engage them in ways that they may want to start thinking about their emotional wellness or mental health without victimizing them, without pathologizing them. them and telling them that there's something wrong with them. And so just encouraging them to reach out on their own, giving them the tools, hoping that they will reach out to something. But also, a way that we really encourage young adults to reach out for services is, and tell them that this is not, especially with psychologists, it might not be through their medical doctor, but reminding them that this is just a space for you to go to talk to someone that's not a part of your family, that's not a part of your support system, to get an outside perspective of whatever is going on for you. And maybe normalizing it by sharing that you may also be struggling in some ways, or if there's a family member that's sought out therapy, normalizing it and saying, this is okay. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to go talk to someone. We've also internalized this thought process of we shouldn't go talk to other people about our families. So really encouraging them and saying, it's okay, like if you have to discuss about our family or what's going on at home, and giving them that permission that they can do that. And that kind of takes away a lot of the stigma that, these are unsaid messages that just get passed on generation to generation. And so when we normalize it for them and tell them it's okay to ask for help, oftentimes they will jump on that opportunity, especially those that are maybe born and raised here. I've noticed that a lot of kids will reach out for mental health services at their school campuses, that being high school, that being, all the way down to elementary school. And even in college, they pay a health fee and they can reach out to their providers on their school campuses, and their parents won't find out. So that's that one piece, is like, they're really worried that their parents are going to find out what they're talking about, what's wrong. And so we will have to do a little bit of education, and sometimes parents are not willing to do that because they do want to know what's going on with their child. But just letting, confidentiality is huge within our profession, and just letting them know that this is a confidential space. We will not find out what's going on, but we really are worried about you and we want you to go and talk to someone.
Yeah, and since you invited me to chime in, I'm going to add a couple of words into that. The word I picked up was disconnected. So if they're feeling disconnected from the family, it's really hard to be telling them anything at all. So I think the first step would be, how do we connect them? So I would say initially, because I do some life coaching as well, and many adults, parents who come to me, professionals, they're often disconnected with their, especially young adult children. First thing is just to connect. So I say, just send them some jokes, send them something that softens them up. I'll say every few days, just send them some funny video or send them a joke, something. So you're starting to form that connection, and then try to reach out to their friend circle or other people who might know them and invite them sort of like to engage with you so you can learn about, because disconnected could be at different levels. Sometimes children have realized we don't want to talk to them because we don't understand, there's various levels. So I think the first thing is just being that vulnerable and saying, I just want to say hi to you. I don't even care about my mental, nothing to share. It's just, how do I just connect? Send something that will engage them. And over time, it'll soften them up, because constantly if you're sending them something that's of interest to them, nothing related to mental health, but just some funny thing or some interesting talk, whatever you can. So first, reach out and try to connect to them. Once you're connected, it'll open up the doors for you to make those kind of conversations, make suggestions, send them specific things. But please just, reach out, connect in some simple way. Just find some way to spend time with them, or let them know that you care. And it may take a long time for them to sort of open up and reply back to you. But if they don't respond right away, don't take it personally. Just your side, do your giving, right? Just keep doing your giving.
Yeah. Good point. I think Preet and Preeti, both of you kind of said two different sides of the same, how do we tackle it? One, I also feel, is seeing the sign or observe the sign. Sometimes you are disconnected or you don't have probably connection with your family or friends, but you observe the signs. And once you observe the signs, as Preeti said, maybe try to find some hook to engage with them. And what I liked what Preet said was, normalize it. That's very key, because a lot of people or kids or adults don't come up and come forward is because they feel they are the only ones impacted or feeling that way. So normalizing that is very, very important. So I hope.
I just want to add one more quick point. I think I totally agree with Preet and Preeti's inputs, but the other thing is to model it. It kind of goes in that category of normalizing it, of course. But if I am myself, talking about my experience of like, I'm seeing somebody right now because I'm trying to, work on this conflict, or I'm feeling like stressed, then even that can help, because, we are huge, big role models for our kids. So if they see us doing that, that also helps them feel like this is something I can do.
How do we streamline the mental health education among the family if they are in different stages of their life, achieving their goals with quite different age group siblings and other family members to be in the same page of understanding? Sometimes mental health needs to be considered with different age groups, and I feel that I feel as understanding perspective level have some difference based on the experience. So I believe what Shirisha is saying is, if you have somebody in a family with different age groups, different stages of their life, achieving different goals, how do we strike a balance?
I was in the tech industry, but I did a lot of research initially and connecting with actually students, children's parents, and adults of all ages. It is true that the needs are different and the way they see things are different. But if we find something that's a unifying factor in the family, like we'll just say, okay, everyone just come and do some stretching together. So we do something that doesn't impact, everyone can do together. Or maybe you find some nice music to listen to together. Like, and just pick 10 minutes in the week, some once in a while, or like a meditation or a relaxation routine. And in fact, in our app, that's what we're providing to parents so that they can meaningfully connect with their children without stepping into their privacy or boundaries. Like, hey, let's all just sit down and listen to this 3-minute thing together. Especially when you notice you've had an argument with a child or a grandparent or it happens all the time. Any friction has happened, then invite them not into a discussion or solving the problem, but invite them just to sit with you, just in company. And slowly, these things, somatically, some of them, we release it through our body. A lot of the grief and pain is held inside our body. We need to understand that, and we can't think away all our problems like I tried to do much earlier, but over life, you realize. So I feel like making some routine, maybe if it's just once a week. What we used to do with my young kids is, okay, we're going to do this yoga and put on a video, and everyone just try to do this together of all age groups. So pick an activity that you can all do regardless of age group to the ability that they can. That would be something to unify everyone and prioritize that and tell them that our physical health is important, but our mental health is equally important. So we need to do for both. No, don't just focus on your physical health. Let's take some time for our mental health.
I think self-care in the form of taking care of our mind, but not just body, is an important aspect to instill from early age on in our children. As a child psychiatrist and kind of sharing a little bit of that developmental perspective here, I think one of the things maybe you're, seeing with your kids is that they are at different stages. One might be in elementary school, other might be in a middle, and some might be, almost a young adult. And so clearly, as they are in different stages of their lives, their needs or emotional needs or social emotional needs kind of change. So of course, the basic building blocks are the family connection, spending one-on-one quality time with your child, whichever way, that is perfect for that particular stage of life. So for a younger kid, you might sit and do an art project. For a middle schooler, you might go for a walk or go on a bike ride. For a high schooler, you might go and get your nails done together. I don't know, like there could be fun activities you can do. So connection is very, big predictor of compliance and teaching skills is what, I think what was Preeti was saying earlier too. But also, since we have such rich material now on the internet about also learning about what your child's needs are at this stage of life, and trying to kind of weave in things around that. For a teen, doing stuff with their peer seems to be of a lot of value. And so that could be a way to, get them connected and do an activity that could help others too. So I think that could be also a way to kind of think about this broadly.
Great.